Had the government never had Social Security, the people who now need it probably would be self-sufficient, because had they had all that income to invest while they were working, instead of being forced to give it to the government that squandered it on a Ponzi scheme. But if most Americans who are 65 today, if they didn't have to pay the payroll tax, and they didn't have to pay the other half of the payroll tax through their employer that was really deducted from their wages, had they had all that money, they could have built up their own retirement account and they would be self-sufficient and they wouldn't need the government. But because the government taxed them to death when they were working, they're now dependent on the government when they retire. But for the people who don't need Social Security, they shouldn't get it. They shouldn't get a nickel of it. We have to eliminate it. And then even the people who need it, unfortunately, they probably can't get as much as they were promised. But I'd like to be able to give them something. But at the same time, I'd like to let the current generation off the hook and get rid of the payroll tax entirely. But that's a topic for another podcast, and I really don't want to get into that one today. I just want to talk about spending. But the other point I wanted to make, based on looking at the comments from last podcast, is what else do I want to cut? Like, the only thing I want to do is take away Social Security and Medicare. Oh, no. I want to cut everything. I don't want to just cut entitlements. I want to cut across the board. So I thought I'd go over just some of the things I wanted to cut, because I pulled up a list of all the federal agencies. Right now, there's 15 departments of government. 15. I'd like to get rid of 10 of them. I'd like to basically narrow it down so that we only have 5 departments left in government. And basically, I'm going to look them up. I got them here on the internet. So we have the State Department, which was established in 1789. I'm willing to keep that, right? State Department's been around since 1789. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they approved of the State Department. So who am I to argue? We're going to keep the State Department. I want to keep the Treasury Department, even though they've done an awful job. In fact, we don't even really have a Treasury Department anymore. We have a debt department, because all we have is debt. In fact, they should rename the Secretary of the Treasury to the Secretary of the Debt, right? Because the Treasury is bare. And the job of the Secretary of the Treasury is to sell debt, is to get people to loan us more money so that we can pay back the money that we've already borrowed, right? It's a perpetual Ponzi scheme. That's why I always joked that the most qualified person for Secretary of Treasury was Bernie Madoff. Although he's dead now, so although who knows, maybe a dead Bernie Madoff would still be better than a living Janet Yellen. But another person potentially who could be Secretary of the Treasury, I'm not sure if he's going to go to jail or not, but he certainly might be qualified for this job, although he didn't get away with his scheme anywhere near as long as Bernie Madoff. And that's what's his name? Bankman-Fried. Maybe we should make him the next Secretary of the Treasury. But anyway, I want to keep the Treasury Department. We actually need it to help, in my mind, repay and restructure all this debt, right? So we can actually get back to having an actual Treasury. So I'm going to keep that. The Defense Department, yes, I want to keep that. That's also one of the, not original departments. It came around in 1947. I mean, although we had a War Department initially, so maybe that's why, because it was renamed. They used to really call it what it was, right? A War Department, right? That's what it was for. It was about war. But I guess somebody didn't like that name because it sounded too aggressive, and so we renamed it as a Defense Department. But I would keep that. Maybe we should go back to the War Department to let people know that that's really what it's about. But anyway, I would keep the Defense Department. Now you've got the Justice Department. Now that one came around in 1870. So we went a long time in this country without a Justice Department, right? We didn't have one until 1870. So we probably could get by without a Justice Department, but I'm willing to keep it. Even though, my father used to call it the Injustice Department, I think we can reform it, but I'm okay with the Justice Department. Now, that's basically it. Now, here's the rest of the departments There's a Department of Interior, a Department of Agriculture, and a Department of Commerce. The Interior Department was started in 1849, Agriculture 1862, and Commerce 1903. Look, maybe we can combine all three of these departments into one, although I really don't think the government should have much to do with agriculture. I mean, mostly what the Agriculture Department does is pay farmers not to grow food, right? I mean, so what's the point of that? I mean, we would have more agriculture if we didn't have a Department of Agriculture. I mean, we don't need it. I mean, farmers can farm without having to coordinate it through the government. So to the extent that we took some of the Department of Agriculture's, policies and implement them through the Interior, it would be a very slimmed down version. And the same thing with Commerce. I mean, Commerce, that's about the Interior. I mean, throw Commerce in the Interior. But again, most of what the Commerce Department does is illegal anyway. It's a violation of the Constitution. So I want to get rid of almost everything the Department of Commerce does anyway. But think about the Commerce Department employs 41,000 people. The Department of Agriculture employs 100,000 people. And the Department of the Interior employs 70,000 people. I mean, I pretty much want to get rid of almost everybody there. I mean, I think we can handle it, the whole thing, maybe 100 people, based on what I think they should do. I mean, most of these jobs are going to get eliminated. Same thing, even though I said we should keep the Justice Department, I don't think we need 113,000 employees. And by the way, the Defense Department employs better than 3 million people. Right? I don't think we need to have a standing army anywhere near that big. In fact, I'd like to get rid of the troops from places like Europe. We got a lot of American troops still here in Europe. I mean, the world wars are over. I mean, the Cold War is gone. I mean, we're trying to resurrect it somehow. But obviously, we don't need this big a standing army. So I would make some cuts there. But I want to get rid of the